My welcome to everyone for this exciting opportunity to share thoughts across the Research Network for Sustainable Prosperity. Oh, what a long way we have traveled in a very short period of time, frankly, from a gleam in Stuart's eye a few years ago to, frankly, what I call a premier think tank in Canada at this time. And it's not necessarily a good time for think tanks. There is a waning influence in North America, and often think tanks are struggling for money. So I think SP stands out in the crowd as having started recently and grown to be a very successful organization in a period of time. I'll focus my comments on the demand side of the interface between policy and policy research in the context of a green economy. We take for granted this interface at our peril. Presumably, our goal is action consistent with an emerging consensus of research on the green economy. Policy advisors, policy decision makers, industry, NGOs, and citizenry are all involved in that process. So to state the obvious, success in the field of policy research does not guarantee success at the interface of policy research and policy decisions and implementation. So how can we do better? So for a lighter touch, I'm comparing ourselves to the Michelin restaurant 3-star approach to assessing how we are doing. Let's call this the stress test for green economy think tank performance. So in order to achieve a 1-star, I have unfortunately 11 characteristics. I won't go through them all, don't worry. The first is leadership, and that is required on everyone's part. Obvious, it is easier if the highest levels of government are open to change, and that's the last I think I'll deal with that issue in Canada at this time. It is also important, however, that policy research community is showing at least a degree of unity and momentum at the highest levels. Now, here at University of Ottawa, we are lucky, in fact, to have the full support of our Vice President Research and the President. But let's face it, the university leadership community in Canada is not a visible force on green economy transformation. In fact, the university leadership community at the national level has not been a force for policy research since it partnered up in the 1990s to get the federal government to put its money where its mouth was on the knowledge-based economy and society. That took a handful of university presidents working with Ottawa to get, for about 5 or 10 years, frankly, to get Ottawa to a sustainable commitment. Now I wonder, has the AOCC or provincial organizations heard of the green economy? What can we do to get our own house in order as we look to leadership in other sectors of society? The second issue important for this interface is priorities. Our conference this week is critical in this regard. Governments have a very difficult time multitasking. Budgets and speeches from the throne are usually successful if they focus attention on a few important and doable things. Catching attention in the competition to be on the short list means the policy research community needs to be focused too. No Christmas tree approaches. Be ready with the big guns when the time is right to catch the wave. Third, public interest at the core. A green economy will serve the interests of all Canadians. The sectoral and geographic scraps have to be dealt with, but they are the challenges to be met to get to the higher welfare curve for all Canadians. My guess is we have a much better story to tell here than either the elites or the public is aware of. So you see where I'm going with these various characteristics. I think each of them is important, and it's useful to remind ourselves from time to time whether we're covering the basis of these characteristics at the interface of policy research. Just to tick the others, it should be medium to long term, integrated and multidisciplinary, global in context and best practice, sophisticated instrument choice rationale, costs and benefits and compensation accurately valued, clear on efficiency, sustainability, and equity, and above all, outcomes, and real partnerships at all levels, and of course, effective communications at every stage. None of this is rocket science, but it takes careful design. Governments frame ideas in these contexts and move forward when the research covers the basis. Have we covered the basis in each of the 4 big ideas on our agenda today? Okay, if that is the conventional thinking on what makes policy and research connections work well, let's move to 2-star performance. What gets you national and international recognition? Aside, of course, from the prerequisite quality and credibility of the researchers, where we know we excel. Okay, I would just mention 2 in particular. The quality of partnerships. Are we a one-off organization, or do we have deep connective tissues that help governments have confidence that there is a growing consensus and an ability to draw upon that consensus to move the policy process forward? The second is understanding governance issues. What sets leaders in the policy research community apart is often their understanding of the governance issues involved and the willingness of researchers to roll up their sleeves and enter the fray. Quality research, yes, but helping out on the doing part as well. This is where trust and commitment are built. This is where ideas turn into results. We are not talking about service delivery here, but as SP did on the low-carbon economy in BC and as increasingly is happening on green community issues, it is important to be seen to be doing in a community of interest as opposed to handing over research papers. Policy is a very dynamic process, and the research community is a powerful influence of change when it engages. With policy capacity shrinking in many governments, there is an increasing opportunity to engage. We at SP are building our engagement and participation capacities here and are optimistic that we are seeing payoffs. Okay, 3-star policy research performance in 5 minutes. So I'll cut through this a little bit. I guess I'm looking at policy research in the context of 2 broad policy transformation contexts, just to look at the relationship between the 2. The first is a transformation in public administration. And here I'll use one model, which is Jocelyn Burgon, the ex-clerk of the Privy Council, did a book on the new synthesis of public administration serving in the 21st century. And the second is a policy transformation within which green economy might be considered. And there I've chosen the inclusive growth work at the OECD. So briefly, Jocelyn reviews public administration reforms over the last 30 years, analyzes what is different about serving in the 21st century, proposes a new enabling framework for public administration, and tests the framework against case studies drawn from Australia, Brazil, Canada, and the Netherlands, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. To greatly oversimplify, Jocelyn's framework has 2 horizontal vectors: government authority and collective power, where there are many actors, and 2 vertical vectors: public policy results and civic results, where there is a distinct responsibility to encourage active citizenry, resilient communities, and civic spirit in order to build the social capital that contributes to the overall performance of society. Now, while public policy results measures performance and gives a sense of direction, civic results depends on capacity building and resilience in the community. And while the classic model has the government largely defining the public interest and being the primary delivery of public goods through traditional instruments and heavy compliance, collective power is widely dispersed with mixed capacities and jurisdictions and relies on multiple collaborative, networked, and innovative arrangements to address emergent solutions. So, returning to our 1st and 2nd star performance, this analysis would suggest that effective green economy research would have to meet the policy world more directly at the decentralized level and with a much greater attention to behavioral change at the individual, household, and community levels, with a view to cultural change and long-term sustainability of the policy change outcomes. It is interesting to note that Europe 2020 strategy appears to be moving in this direction. Market-based solutions are compatible with this new model of public administration, but continuing to make the case for empowerment at the more local levels is important. It is interesting that this also is consistent with UNEP's definition of the green economy. Okay, the second transformation context is inclusive growth, and I'll try to be quick here. And I chose growth simply because growth and jobs is always at the top three priorities of any government in the OECD, and policy frameworks and discussion reflects that priority. But what if the definition of growth itself and its measurement shifts? What are the implications for the green economy? After all, that's what we're aiming to do too. One of the generally accepted conclusions from research over the last 20 years is the idea that economic growth is important but not sufficient for welfare improvements, and that both should be preferably be addressed simultaneously for mutual reinforcement. So the OECD was asked to build on its work on well-being, which is multidimensional, and in fact they include some 11 dimensions, and income as well as non-income contributions to increasing welfare of individuals in society. It also builds on the OECD work on the drivers of both income growth and income inequality. And importantly, it provides a framework for assessing the benefits from economic growth, how they are distributed across social groups, and how policies and institutions affect them. More specifically, instead of one measure of growth, i.e. household income, the work proposes the risk of unemployment and health status as the non-income dimensions of growth, as well as taking account of the distributions of outcomes along these three dimensions and across different population groups. The non-income measures could include such other elements as education and community attachment, although measurement issues become serious challenges. And in fact, this is the main argument of the OECD for not including the environment in their work on inclusive growth. For me, this underlines three things. My time is up. Do you want to hear the three things? Okay. Well, we Stuart doesn't. Well, we at SP searched for the greatest common ground between the environment and the economy. We have to be cognizant of the importance of equity to the developing world and the rising priority it has gained in the developed world as well, following the Great Recession. While we as an organization do not necessarily want to lead on the role of social inclusion in sustainability, we would be wise to partner with others who will be conducting policy research in this area. Secondly, Ed Barbier's assessment that perhaps the biggest obstacle to attaining sustainable development is the erroneous view that the environment is at best peripheral and at worst irrelevant to economic development. I really have to wonder if this is not one of the underlying reasons why governments, and in fact the OECD, is apparently buying increasingly into the inclusion of distributional issues in its growth agenda while still reluctant to pick on environmental issues. Thirdly, the measurement issues are improving, but in my view continue to be at the heart of reluctance of economic authorities in and outside governments to take on sustainability in a more serious way. Valuation, accounting, and incentives are fundamental, particularly given our interest in natural capital and our emphasis on pricing and market-based instruments. Convincing governments to take on investment in this kind of intellectual infrastructure is getting harder, not easier. We need collaborators and strategy to turn this around. I think SP has to prepare a case not only for a new framework for sustainable prosperity, but a case for accounting and environmental sustainability which underlies it. Thank you very much.